y'all, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Morgan, and here we do all things spooky, but specifically this month we are doing nothing but reading your scary stories that you send in to me. So check out the description for where to send your stories if you want to send me any to read, and you do want to send me stories to read. Am I hypnotizing you? Are you convinced? Listen, if you don't want to send them to me, do it for the kitties. Fighting to be on my lap this whole time, but suddenly didn't want to be. Please check out that description for where to send your stories, like I was saying, and all of my other social medias are linked there as well. But without further ado, let's get into the stories. I've watched your content for a while and always wanted to submit some of my stories. I've always been sensitive to energy even when I was little. I'm from a very small town in Wyoming, and in this small town we had an old school that was used for sort of multi-purpose buildings. Everyone calls it the old junior high. It hasn't been used as a proper school since the 90s. I've always been told stories of it being haunted and never believed it as a kid, but one day I'd gone in with my family to go to this little thrift sale thing. This happened in one of the lowest levels of the room. The energy felt weird. I didn't think anything of it being 8 years old, but when I went into the hall to get a snack, I heard a child giggle. I looked around and I was feeling watched and heard very distinctly my name being called from the second floor. That second floor was closed off by a locked gate. It was a child's voice, almost sing-songy, calling my name, but when I looked, I saw no one. I felt watched and anxious until we left the property. I have a few more experiences in this building and one in my own high school, which isn't far from the old junior high. I also have some stories from my childhood. I no longer live in that town, but I visit regularly for family, so I'm happy to tell you if you're interested. I love your content and your cats. Thank you. It's really creepy. So, it was an old school. I wonder if something happened to a little girl in that building. Possible. Alright, next story. I had a few spooky things happen to me in my mom's house that we lived in from when I was in 5th grade until I was 21 when my mom passed away. I'm now 35, so this has been a while, but now I still remember it like it was yesterday. My mom never experienced anything, at least that she told me about, and everything I experienced happened in my room and only my room. The first time I had something happen was when I was sleeping. I woke up because I got a massive chill that almost shocked me awake. I looked over at the window and see a large, white, almost sparkly mist hovering over this window. It wasn't scary, just unsettling. The second thing to happen was when I was in my bathroom, which has a door to my bedroom. It also has a second door to the hallway. The door to my room is facing the mirror above the sink. I was brushing my teeth when I bent down to rinse my mouth, and I got the urge to look in my mirror. Well, as soon as I stood upright, I saw a figure. It was in a white shirt, and it walked past the doorway in my room. Which wouldn't really be scary in itself, but where that figure walked was right where my bed was. Like, no person could physically walk there. That one freaked me out. I slept in the living room that night because of it. The third and scariest one was actually when I was touched. I got home from my restaurant job at around 10:30 p.m. I hadn't turned anything on besides lights, and I was going to pretty much go straight to bed. I sat on my bed to take my shoes off, and I heard a giggle. Keep in mind that my mom worked third shift, so I was alone. As that realization hit me, I felt a slap across my face and heard a second, louder giggle. The slap wasn't hard, so it didn't hurt, but I was terrified. I only slept in my room a handful of times after this. Those are the main ones, and I'll try to compile a few more and send a second email later on. Thank you in advance if you read this. Please do. Oh my gosh. The way something has to be so strong and so physically manifested to where it can physically hurt you is really alarming. So anytime someone sent me in a story where they've been physically hurt or I've been physically hurt by something myself, it's always really alarming, and at that point, whatever that is doesn't need to be in your space because it should not be hurting you. And again, the fact that it has that much energy manifested into it to where it can, that's really bad. Alright, next story. I had to ask permission from my husband for this, and he said that I should send it to you. I wouldn't necessarily say this is a scary tale, but it shook me nonetheless. This happened in around 2018, maybe 2019 in South Carolina. I would not say that I'm proficient and in-tuned in spiritual connections mostly. I was told in my upbringing that it was bad to mess with the spiritual world, or that it overall didn't exist. But throughout my life, I would say that I've had some small experiences with the other side. Small things like the TV or microwave turning on with no one around, whispered voices, and footsteps late at night when everyone was asleep or not in the house at all. Shadows out of the corner of my eye, dogs staring at things that were not there, but I always just told myself it's an old house. You're up late and tired, etc., even though I knew deep down it wasn't any of that. But this particular incident was different. I was staying over at my then boyfriend, now husband's house, and at the time he was living with his dad and stepmom. He had just moved here to South Carolina from Tennessee. Now I've lived in South Carolina my entire life, so I am well aware of the history, especially of where I live. Lost history of war and the unfortunate outcomes of it. But I do not believe this had anything to do with the history of the state itself, but instead my husband's family. To be more specific, his dad, and let me explain to you why I think this is. His dad has a long history of being a first responder and working in emergency medicine. A bit prior to this night, my husband's dad's best friend and co-worker slash teammate and my husband's godfather had passed. It was a tragic, unexpected accident. For the sake of not going into too much detail to bring up old wounds, and purely out of respect for this man who I never personally met, I will not go into detail. After that accident, my boyfriend and his dad went out of state to his funeral. I want to say the following weekend is when this happened. Like I said, I was staying over at their house like I do very often. It was late at night, definitely after midnight, but no later than around 3. I was the only person awake. I have very bad insomnia, so I'm often up late into the night. I'm not sure what I was doing, probably reading a book or watching YouTube on my phone. My boyfriend was sound asleep, and I could hear his dad and stepmom snoring from the room right next to his. Well, I get up to go to the bathroom, and for a little visualization, we were on the 2nd floor. The stairs were directly in front of his room. You walk out of the door, and it's right in the middle of his parents' room to the left and the bathroom on the left. So I walk out of his door and froze. His parents' bedroom door was wide open like it always was, but in the open doorway was a tall, dark figure of a man about 6 feet. It looked as if the man was wearing a dark-colored shirt and heavy yellow pants. I didn't really get the feeling of fear or like it was something there to hurt anyone, but it still shook me to my core. I quickly ran into the bathroom, shut the door, and tried to tell myself that I just imagined it. It's late at night. When I went back into the hall, I looked at the spot where the man stood and he was gone. I went back into my boyfriend's room, turned off my phone, and tried to sleep, but I could not shake the image of this man. Now, this house was not a pre-existing house. It was a new built and a new development that 10 years ago didn't really exist. So I didn't think it was related to the house itself, like I feel with my own house that was built in the 50s and have seen many residents come and go. The next morning, the events of the night before were still weighing heavy on me, so I told my husband. I described the man and what I saw him wearing, and when I told him about the clothes, he kind of stopped. Like firefighter gear? He asked. He then walked out of his room and came back with a picture of his dad and his friend who had passed a few weeks prior. Sure enough, it was him that I saw. At least that's what I believe to this day. I believe that he was there to check on his best friend to see how he was handling the passing. Maybe in a way, there to let him know that he was still with him and not to do anything dumb. I've never seen this man since. Since my boyfriend and I moved into our own place, got married, and his parents sold that house, I will never forget that experience, though. We don't talk much about it, but from time to time his godfather's name will come up and I remember that night. I've only had one other experience since this that shook me to my core, but it involves my grandpa that I was very close to who passed in 2020. This happened just last year in 2024. I was going through a tough time and felt his presence and the overwhelming smell of Winston cigarettes. I think he was just there to comfort me and let me know it was all going to work out, but it was nothing like the tale above. Probably because I knew immediately who it was coming to say hi to me. Sorry this is so long-winded, but I felt like every detail was important. Thank you. Every detail was important. Oh, that one's like wholesome in a way. It's very sad. I don't really get wholesome stories. I usually just get terror, so thank you for that. Alright, next story. This isn't exactly my story, but I was there for it. I personally never had any issues with the paranormal, but I do believe in it. My mother, on the other hand, is somebody who is very sensitive to energies and lived in a haunted house. My mother and her friend, who we will call A, were at our house. My cousin was also with them at the time. We have a big living room and a sliding glass door leading outside that's basically connected to the living room. Well, me and my cousin are sitting in the living room playing, and my mother and A were outside for what felt like hours. Once my mother and A came back in, my mother was pale. She was very shaky. A took my cousin and left instantly. I never knew what happened outside until a few years later. For some context, A has a brother who's very unwell. He's tried to end his life many times. During this time, they were outside the sliding door. My mom described as not being herself, and everything felt weird, as if she wasn't controlling herself. Then she told A that she needed to leave to check on her brother, and I quote, "You know where to look." When my mom was done talking, she was pale and shaky. It's like something had possessed her and was speaking through her. A left to go to her brother's house. He wasn't at his house, so she called a few people and went driving around. We live somewhat near some logging roads, and they're very popular for locals to go explore. A and her brother had gone up there multiple times. So apparently A drove to a specific spot and found her brother's car at a gate. She went on foot and walked before finding her brother with a rope at a tree. The brother's alright, but my mother's never forgotten that story, and every time she tells someone the story, she always looks scared. I have no idea what it was or what it could have been. I don't either. I literally have nothing to offer for that one. I've never heard a story like that in my life. Maybe someone in the comments will have something to add, because it's terrifying, but like, again, in like sort of a good wholesome way, in a way, because like his life got saved. But I don't know. Okay, I accidentally picked a story that I had already read, so we are going to go back through my email and pick another random story. Hey Morgan, I'm the son from the divorce house if you still remember, and I wanted to send the other stories in another email just because they're so long. I hope you enjoy them, and if you do, I hope to get to see your reaction on YouTube. For you and all your viewers, please make sure to have a positive energy and light on when listening. I really don't want either of these to get any ideas. I don't like the way my ring light flickered right as I said that. I'm regretting filming this at midnight. This occurrence takes place when I was 16 on and after a road trip to see my paternal grandmother. It was around Christmas time and my cousins were visiting as well. It was my father, sister, and I, and the sleeping arrangements were a little short. When you enter my grandmother's house, there's an open office room to the left and an open living room to the right. My sister and the cousins all slept on an air mattress and on the couch in the living room. Since I wanted a little bit of solitude, I slept on a small couch in the office room. I said goodnight to everyone, and we all turned off most of the lights and went to sleep. I don't remember what woke me up, maybe an itch or sensation, but when I did, I immediately felt it. I was facing the back of the couch, which was up against a wall with a walkway in front of it. Behind me, I could feel an intensely dark shadow, like someone was blocking out a light in my peripheral. I could tell it had a white mask, like one of those theater masks, and some sort of staff, but I couldn't distinguish any of its features aside from that. The best physical description I could compare it to is the malevolent masked spirit in Spirited Away. No face! I didn't dare look, or think about, observe, or even say anything to it. The most I did was a little turn and keep my eyes closed, pretending like I was still asleep. That's when the mental image of a black and white dog jumped up into view. I was shocked. I felt myself jolt, and I didn't know what to do. I don't know if that dog was a separate entity or part of this white masked shadow, but I loved how it popped into view despite how petrified I was. The thing is, normally sensing this stuff doesn't scare me. At most, I get a little shock in my gut when I see something out of the corner of my eye or feel some energy around me, but it's always easy to ignore. This thing, whatever it was completely different. It was like it injected adrenaline straight into my heart and flooded my mind with dread. Even as I write this, I can feel the same over my shoulder stare behind me and the terror that comes with it. I wonder if it peered into my mind to figure out what I liked or didn't like, and used that against me to find an opening to attach itself. I somehow fall back asleep, though, and the rest of that trip was normal. It was the night after I came back that really creeps me out. You're probably saying, what could be creepier than that? I, in fact, was. I'm already getting chills down my spine. Well, to put it simply, it followed me the entire 3-hour drive back and kept itself hidden the entire time. The only thing I noticed was how strange I felt on the car ride home, then I went back to my mom's house. At this time, we lived in a townhouse with a neighbor behind and a neighbor to the house's left. The electrical work and plumbing weren't the best, but they worked well enough. One thing that always bothered me was the kitchen light switch, because there was 3 of them, one by the door since it was immediately to the right, one on the wall across from that first light switch, and one on the wall between the kitchen and dining room behind it. The reason I had to explain how it has 3 light switches is because there's often times that it's hard to turn it on because of interference between the 2 different switches, unlike when a light has 2. The night after my trip to my grandmother's house, the kitchen light was acting up again. I was going back and forth between the other switches, complaining to my mom about it. She told me to try the other switch, the one in the dining room, and I shrugged and walked through the dark kitchen, still being dimly lit by the light above the front door and the light in the dining room. Then I felt the exact same dread feeling that I experienced back at my grandmother's house. I sensed the same entity shrouded in a shadow with a white blank theater mask. I tried my best to make my way through the kitchen, just ignoring it, and tried the other light switch, but it didn't turn on the light. Thankfully, the lower floor of the house was essentially a circle, because the last thing I wanted to do was walk back through that kitchen. I must have been clearly shaken, because my mom looked back at me. She had concern when she asked what was wrong. My response was like a terrified child, and I could only say, "There's something in there." She nodded and looked over at the kitchen and spoke in a matter-of-fact tone. "You're not welcome here, and you have to leave now." And with her help, I was able to usher it out of the front door, and then she had me line the windows and doors with salt. I'm really glad I haven't encountered the entity since. The next experience happens a few months after the COVID lockdown, when people would start going back to work with their face masks and regular temperature checks. My sister and I would stay at home, and I would start the online school meetings about an hour or so before my sister. In the townhouse, all the floors, including the stairs, are wooden, except for the bathroom and kitchen, which were tiled. Upstairs to the right is a hall with a half wall to keep people from falling down the stairs, and my sister's bedroom is on the opposite side of my bedroom. I had my stuff set up, attending my classes as normal. Right now, I know my sister is sleeping because it was maybe 8 in the morning, with her classes starting at least half an hour later. With all of this in mind, I was dumbfounded when I not only heard but felt something run up the stairs. It sounded and felt like it was on its hands and feet. Then it stayed on its hands and feet as it scurried through the hallway and stopped right outside my door. I had a mixture of disbelief and confusion, with fear and anxiety that came with hearing an unknowing creature run up the stairs and stop at my door. I I could only stare at my door, feeling this creature staring directly at me. The only way I could describe it is like a spider, but not with spider parts. No, of course not. It had human arms and legs, several of them coming out from its core torso mass. A single human head with several completely solid red eyes. The entire body otherwise was black, but a solid black, not like a shadow. I felt like it was stuck there for an hour until it slowly walked down the hall and the sound and aura disappeared. I looked back at the clock and it had only been maybe 5 to 10 minutes. I just tried to brush it off and finish my schoolwork, and at the end of the day I explained what happened to my mom. Being the rather naive kid I was, I asked if I could draw it. Of course she suggested not to, and I'm glad I listened. I don't know what brought it back, however. Maybe it was an occasional thought going back to that moment with it staring at me through the door wanting to draw it. This time, instead of running up the stairs like before, it climbed through my window. I couldn't see it, but I knew it was there, and I calmly told it, "You're not welcome here. This is my space. Leave and don't come back." It hissed at me. I was appalled and just told it off until it left again. I'm just relieved I haven't had another visit. Sometimes I read these stories and have like nothing to offer. I have no thoughts for that, but you know what? I'm gonna have a nightmare tonight and I'm gonna specifically blame this story. That is literally like something an author thinks up in like the most terrifying horror book that I read. How you doing over there?
Not great. Cats got in a fight in the middle of that story. My heart stopped.
With that being said, I guess I will wrap up this video. I think I'm gonna film a few more tonight for the rest of the week, and I'm hoping none of them are as scary as that last one because I will literally have to stop filming for the night. But thank you guys so much for hanging out with me, and I will see you tomorrow to read more stories.